Ladies and gentlemen, this is your pilot speaking, and on behalf of your SGAC crew, we welcome you aboard. This flight, SGX 2018, service to Washington, D.C., and for today's flight, I'm going to tell you a story. There was, once upon a time, a very young student pilot, but also a very young flight instructor, and they took off in a small Cessna piston aircraft out of a small grass landing strip into the deep blue sky, which was peaceful, and where you can see the land that is green and beautiful. And after flying for a while, practicing very challenging, hard maneuvers, the student pilot started to feel a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit frustrated. And he looked up, and he saw a turboprop aircraft flying in loft, and he turned to his instructor and told him, they have the best job. They get to do the real flying, and they have all the fun. But up in the sky, which was peaceful, and where you could see the land that was green and beautiful, young captain said, tired from performing different flights in the same day, tired of feeling the rumbling of the engines all the time, and he looked up, and he saw a passenger jet, a Boeing 737, and he thought to himself, they have the best job. They get to do the real flying, and they have all the fun. And up above, in the deep blue sky, which was peaceful, and where you could see the land that was green and beautiful, the sun began to set, and the sky started to turn into this darkish blue color, and the horizon turned red, and in the cockpit of the 737, two pilots looked up and saw a very bright star moving across the sky. But this was no normal star. This was human-made. It was the International Space Station, 250 miles up, 1,320,000 feet above the mean sea level. And the very young first officer turned to his captain and told him, they have the best job. They get to do the real flying, and they have all the fun. Now, before I continue with my story, I need to add a little bit of context. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, no pain, no gain. Oh, there we go. That's a lot better. No pain, no gain. We usually think about it when we are exercising or working out, but we really struggle at putting it into everyday situation. You'll see, when I was a young boy, I used to look up to people, real-life heroes, and I used to think that nature, just by luck, had given them just superpowers that had enabled them to get to where they were. People like Charles Lindbergh, Amelia Earhart, Chuck Yeager, Neil Armstrong, Bob Hoover, Eileen Collins, and Captain Chesley Sully Sullyberger III. They had the full combo. They were naturally skilled, they were natural leaders, they were naturally brave, they were naturally cool, and they had crossed the Atlantic, they had broken the sound barrier, they walked on the moon, they became space shuttle commanders, and they landed a crippled aircraft on the Hudson River, saving the lives of 155 people aboard. So they inspired my love for aviation, and ever since I was a small boy, I've been living this love story. But I also wanted to see something about them reflected on me. The problem is that the country where I come from, I didn't know people like that, and other than my parents, I never really had mentors. The concept of mentorship, it's a little ambiguous there. Mentors don't really, you don't find them often. But I wanted to find the key ingredient that would allow me to get to where they were. I wanted to know what I needed to do in order to end up being more like this instead of ending up looking like that. So I was pretty clueless, but I decided to start anyway. And I began my aviation career. I learned to fly before I could drive. And that was very challenging. Getting my pilot certificates was, I didn't think I was going to have the skill to get there, but somehow, despite the challenge, I pushed through and I made it happen. Just to encounter another challenge, which is when I became a flight instructor. I was just 19 years old. I didn't think that the FAA was going to let me do that, but I pushed forward and somehow it happened. But then I encountered another challenge, which is when I held my very first student solo on his own, and that was more challenging because now I'm responsible for 2 people. And as a matter of fact, the FAA was going to hold me liable for any of his actions as he was flying by himself in Florida skies, which is scary. But everything turned out okay, and somehow made it happen. And then when I turned 21 years old, I got my first job as an airline pilot, flying a 50-seat passenger jet. And that was also another challenge in all the systems and procedures, regulations from different countries, et cetera, et cetera. And somehow I made it happen. I had gotten somewhere, but I still couldn't see that about my heroes reflected on me. I didn't know. Fortunately, because I hang out with people like you who fuel my aerospace nerdiness, I never lost enthusiasm, and I kept studying the lives and accomplishments of my heroes. And even though they all had different skills, different traits, different education backgrounds, goals, and styles, I began to see one trait that they all had, which is this. They all had the inner ability to respond resiliently to adversity and failure. They had the inner capacity to stick through hardship to their long-term passions and goals. Some people call it grit. I call it the stretch. They would stretch themselves beyond their comfort zones, beyond where most people just stop 3 feet away from reaching their goals. And that extra 10% is what enabled them to break their earthly boundaries. That extra 10% is where the magic happens. And, but how? I wanted to know how. And then I began to reflect on my own life, and I realized that all the major milestones in my aviation career took place precisely when I was confronted with a challenge that was bigger than myself. When I thought that I was not going to be able to make it through, when I thought that I was not going to be able to get that license, that certificate, push that student forward, and I was like, what the hell? I'm just going to keep trying. And then it hit me. That's what I love about flying. I love the mental challenge of managing that high-performance aircraft mass and energy professionally, efficiently, safely, comfortably from point A to point B. And that's what it was about my heroes. They love challenges. They embrace challenges. They were challenge addicts. They actively look up for challenges. So, and that's what it is about this industry. The aerospace industry demands challenge seekers. This room is filled with them. So that interaction between the stretch and a challenge is what generates the lift component in the aerodynamics of life. It is the stretch what is going to allow us to become hypersonic, cislunar, interplanetary, interstellar. So whenever you're confronted with a new challenge, just think about this concept, the stretch. And the moment that you decide to be like, what the hell, I'm just gonna push forward, you're gonna know that you're on the right track. In this conference, we have listened to many, many big challenges. And so just remember that. It is a stretch what allows us to fly through the storms to get to the other side where the sky is blue and peaceful, and from where you can see the land that is green and beautiful. So with that being said, I would like to bring my story to a smooth landing. So the very young 737 first officer looked up and saw the International Space Station. And he contemplated how challenging it would be for him to be up there among his heroes. And he decided to fly forward. And up above, into the sky, which was dark, punctured by stars, a crew of 3 astronauts looked down at the Earth through the deep blue sky, which was peaceful, and where you could see that the land was green and beautiful. And a veteran commander turned to his crewmates and told them, there it is. There's that small grass landing strip where I first learned how to fly. Down there has got to be a young student flying a Cessna, having all the fun, doing the real flying. That is where the fun really began. Thank you. That's all.